to be curious about what is going on, to learn deeper, and to understand how to be the real water expression you are, and just increasing life force of everyone around you and empowering everyone to do their passion. So I'm really fascinated about the human being. I'm going to share a moment with you guys. Thank you so much. He's Dan Winter. Thanks for him. A lot of us understand how gravity works, how to travel through negentropy, the spiral that creates reality. That means that the reality is always negentropy, so you can travel forever and ever. And this is completely like water making things happen, because I called him a few hours ago and he said, yes, let's do it. Let's invite everyone to explore how water increases life force ascends, so we can explore how to make our water fractal for supporting our ascension to wherever we are in another higher realm of reality. Because why not to play that? And why not to challenge levitation if you really challenge water and water possibilities becoming gel through increasing life force, and you are life force and an avatar. So I invite him just to have an amazing exploration of how negentropy can explain with his formula that he discovered, the mathematical formula of how everything is sacred geometry. And including that to the EA theory, you understand that you are the creator of reality through frequencies. So by restructuring water, the water within and the water outside, because there is just water covering everything, we could restructuring water, filtering and recovering fractal structure and purity and liquidity, we can become something completely amazing and never seen before, and curiosity will take us there, and bright minds like Dan Winter will take us there. We just need to let them share with us such amount of wisdom. Thank you for being here with us, Dan. I will love to be able to take all your ideas and share it in pen drives all over the world. But I'm going to share with the audience, please, just share with us how to travel through eternity using water knowledge, how water is the mother, the source, and how we can really, by specific understanding of how it works, how we can explore the highest expression of high frequency humanity. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, Eve. I'm glad to be here. Oh, I just have to undo my...
You are mute, Dan. Unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'm delighted to be here, Eva. And indeed, it would be nice to have a little bit of vision of the actual science behind implosion fractality and negentropy in water. So we could just review that. Most of you have seen some of that at fractalfield.com, where we have all these files and graphics and physics, as it were. But, you know, most of us have this experience that when you get near really good running water, all your children need to go pee. And it's like the water inside your body wants to connect with the flow. And so it's obvious that that's true. I mean, any nurse in a hospital knows to help a person who needs to take a pee, you run running water, and suddenly the water inside your body wants to join the flow. That's a real phenomenon. And how that intelligence of water works electrically, that's my field, as it were, fractalfield.com. It's a fractal field. So we start with the proof of how hydrogen is fractal. And basically it's quite simple that in my new book, Origin of Biologic Negentropy, I showed that if you take this musical key signature of the universe called Planck length and time, it's the wavelength and time, which is the key signature of every wave in physics. It's quite simple. It's the unit of common divisibility of every wave that physics has ever measured. So that's the musical key signature of the universe, quite literally. It's well known, 1.61 times 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. But then, if you simply take the perfect fractal pine cone from that threshold, which is multiplying by powers of golden mean ratio, which makes this caduceus waveform, and you can see all the pictures at fractalfield.com/vacuum energy. So you get a waveform that looks like a caduceus based on golden ratio from Planck. So if you multiply by integer exponents, by simple whole number powers of Planck, you get all these wavelengths. And it turns out you get exactly 3 radii of hydrogen, and Earth year, Venus year, galactic year, solar year, precessional year, and the Mayer wave, the most important frequencies of the blood, and the Schumann harmonics, and the brainwave harmonics for bliss, and really all the important biologic frequencies that create negentropy. For example, you get the sound waves, the wavelengths that Priory used to create healing, which now is Therify.net, working in 25 countries. So you get a literally implosion music. It's very simple. And so that is proof of, it is the perfect fractality, and it's proof that hydrogen is fractal. And you see, when that perfect pine cone inside everything negentropic gains inertia towards center, because the waves add and multiply recursively, constructively, it's called heterodyning of phase velocities, you get charge implosion. And we have a lot of new physics publications proving that that's the reason gravity exists, and specifically that's how hydrogen makes gravity. And again, that's all at fractalfield.com/vacuum energy, including the publications. The key physics publication there is where we proved in generalized wave equations that golden ratio is the wave mechanics solution to maximum constructive wave interference, and therefore constructive compression. Remember, constructive compression is the solution to just about every problem that physics ever had, and even every problem that society ever had. Perfect constructive compression or implosion, Einstein's named as the solution to the unified field, and obviously is the solution to alchemy and urban design and the history of computers, and it goes on, and mindfulness and how to get through death. It's all about perfect compression. So that implosive compression we showed existed in hydrogen. You look at the top-down view, it looks like a rose, a fractal, or a flower. And so now we see what hydrogen is doing. Remember, that hydrogen is in the center of every water bond, H2O, and the same hydrogen is at the center of every DNA ladder rung, zipper. So when DNA... Go ahead.
So, excuse me. So basically, you are relating the structure of how reality is created in circuit geometry patterns that are spirals spinning in a perfect ratio. You are relating that with the impression of the structure of reality. We explore all the reality that nature does is with that formula, and that is the same structure that hydrogen, that water has. Is exactly the same geometrical shape.
Yes.
And you have the formula of that can basically express the formula of how things goes in the ground, and how memory travels through consciousness, and how, like, why the vagina has this shape, and why a flower has all the shapes are that structure that is the imploder of energy that creates whatever we explore as reality, that is vibrating and moving through that spiral, but it looks like we can touch it and things are fixed. But how we can, just keep going, how we can understanding water, that we are immersed in a big bubble of water with 4 states, how it works, that how we can help water to have this fractal structure, that instead of being broken and like a bank water becoming real structured water. Sorry, yes. Just to clarify.
No, I love your enthusiasm, Ava. Ava's our best ambassador in the world. She's wonderful. And she's right. So to see some of those pictures, look at theimploder.com. Basically, you design the perfect vortex, which we named Victor Schauberger's dream, the dream of perfect implosion, based on that equation. And it's simply 5 and 10 spirals on a perfect 60-degree cone of charge implosion, and which now we have proved is how hydrogen is assembled. And again, simple, how to visualize this. Visualize 2 perfect pine cones kissing noses perfectly at the Planck threshold. That's the whole picture. You're done with you got all the geometries right there. And if you animate that in 3D, you have literally the grail, goldenmean.info/grail for the animation. And you revolve that and you have the only possible 3-dimensional fractal. And that vortex nests an infinite nest of dodecahedroicosa. And, we have all those pictures, but they're all there on the web. We don't need to go dig them out right now. You can see them. They're beautiful at fractalfield.com and the PowerPoint at fractalfield.com/vacuum energy. So, Ava's question is, well, how does this make the perfect map to infinity, this perfect communication mechanism, and then literally the doorway through death, all based on the fractality of hydrogen and how that's in the center of water and DNA. So what happens to create that kind of water radio and DNA is both based on the same mechanics. Remember how the water in your body knows how to join the flow. The way that radio is created, and you could think of it literally as DNA radio as well as water radio, is that when the waves travel down that pine cone, what's called transverse or up and down component of the electromagnetic energy is converted in what's called translation vorticity, that as it goes down that pine cone, the waves add and multiply recursively, constructively, and that geometry of perfect compression turns compression into acceleration out the toothpaste tube at the Planck threshold. And what's happening in terms of electromagnetics is the up and down component of that wave, called transverse electromagnetics, which frankly is the basis of all our radio energy, but the up and down component of a wave in the ocean doesn't go as far as the other component of the wave, which is the compressional component, sometimes called scalar or torsional wave in electromagnetics, but the correct term is longitudinal electromagnetics. For example, in a tsunami, the up and down portion of the wave is what gets you at the shore, but the way the tsunami goes 600 miles an hour in the ocean it's the compressional component, longitudinal wave, that'll pass under a boat and you don't know the tsunami just went underneath you. And that's the part that goes fast and goes far. And that's the point that in electromagnetics, the longitudinal waves are not well understood and not used for communication, but are the physics of gravity waves. And the longitudinal wave will go through just about anything, like a Faraday cage. When Ingo Swann lit that flame with his mind through a Faraday cage, and it was measured many times at a distance, the physics was the longitudinal component that came out that fractal squirt gun at the center of hydrogen, embedded in the phase velocities of this, what we call DNA radio. It's literally the pendulums that are all locked together in this infinite stellar dodeca ecosa, why the Earth grid is dodeca and why DNA is dodeca, and why the arrangement of masses in the galaxy are dodeca. They're all this geometry, so they can lock waves into this big 3D rose-like perfect fractal. And that array, where the compressional nodes are, for example, the sacred spaces on the planet, which we know are dodeca, where radioactive critical mass is changed, where telepathy is possible. It happens because those are still points in that nodal array. You could think of it as a cymatic waveform. And so what's happening is, let's take the physics of death, for example, that when you die, it's known that you see four geometries: lattice, cobweb, tunnel, spiral, and your electromagnetic field is doing implosive compression, because to die successfully, you have to go down that same vortex cone in order for your inertia to be distributed into the longitudinal array, which is the collective unconscious, ancestral memory, the communion of saints, the astral memory. So the Akashic records, that's what I was trying to think of. So, but that same physics is how hydrogen delivers its memory into that longitudinal array. And that's why Ava got so excited when she said, this is the way to get immortal. She's actually right. So examples of how to do that mechanically is, if you look at theimploder.com and you see that perfect vortex in there based on the equation, and we're using this in 20 or 30 countries around the world. We have the small vortex, tri-imploder and imploder shower, and then we have the new commercial one, the ultra imploder, and they're all based on that same perfect vortex. So basically, if you get in the perfect vortex, you solve the problem. What problem did you solve? Any problem. For example, when the kids see without their eyes, we know they make that same golden ratio harmonics, alpha, beta, in their brain waves, which are the Schumann harmonics, which also fit that equation. And when you make those harmonics in your brain waves, suddenly your eyes are closed and a vortex tube appears inside your head, and you can see through it. And then we got hundreds of kids seeing with other eyes, and we're training them in brainwaves. flameinmind.com/outer vision. The thing that's cool is now we know the same vortex that made hydrogen work is the physics of consciousness. I do mean the physics of consciousness. You know how all these scientists are running around saying, we need to know the physics of consciousness. But not one of those scientists took into account two things. One, that it's been measured that focused consciousness causes electric fields to compress. Bill Tiller measured it many times. Two, you can take your consciousness outside your head. You know, whether it's astral travel, near-death experience, remote viewing, you know, you got all these PhDs are now reporting, yes, I had an out-of-body experience. Yes, I had an and now we know exactly where the person who was dying on the operating table reported the tools the surgeon was using to cut into their head, you know, while they were having their near-death experience. And there's hundreds of these PhDs reporting the same thing. So any physicist who says they've got a physics of consciousness and don't explain how you take consciousness outside your head are missing the point. So what it is that you're taking outside your head is the same vortex that started with hydrogen. It's called a plasma vortex imploding, charge vortex, literally a little donut of plasma of charge. And that's why you can measure where ghosts are, you can measure remote viewers showing up in some place because they create this little implosion spot in charge. So not only do we know how hydrogen works, but we know how consciousness works based on the perfect vortex.
Thank you so much, Dan. You know what did happen in my visual mind? Just for the audience to know, I'm super visual and my capacity of understanding through graphics it creates easy ways to share things in visuals. But I just saw, because for Greek people, the ancient Greeks used to call syneidesis, that word was describing consciousness, thought, imagination, and time traveling. This was syneidesis. And what about if because humans are really domesticated with things that doesn't exist, a lot of constructs like rivers, seas, oceans, cloud, a part of the rain, a part of the, anyhow, because we are full of constructs. What about if consciousness and water are the same thing? What about if the holographic screen that we are living in, we touch it, we describe it as water, because you are saying that the water particle has a center that is what it is growing with life force with the sun. That's why evaporation goes up, because it increases life force. So we can see an hexagon and a center that grows inside, and that creates a donut of life force happening, because as Gerald Pollack discovered, I guess, I don't know if I mentioned him because I learned it from him, fractal attractions works in the fourth state of water, that is gel, that is called S. And with understanding that consciousness, your consciousness, or your memory, let's call it your memory, because at the end what travels out is the memory, no? And your memory can travel through that vortex that is the screen of reality that we call water itself, crystallizing what we perceive as surfaces that really doesn't exist because they are already moving all the time. So by understanding that we are really, really trained in cutting things that are unified and calling them different things, you know, like when you understand the perceptive error of separation in water, you see it all over the place. So I just connect completely the visual of the hexagon with life force, and you are that particle having an implosion experience all the time. And understanding this not only will allow humans to be fearless of dying alone, because it's the best thing that can happen to you, because no one around you will grab you and say, no, I won't die, because you have to be completely in bliss and in peace with reality and know nothing to love more or to forgive more or whatever, to go complete through the vortex, through the pine cone, to the other side, wherever you have to appear, that if it happens, and imagine the possibility that you being aware completely of getting birth, because you get your memory, so you see that you have a body that you can't control yet, and your parents doesn't know that you are an old soul, and that will explain all those kids that understand things without being taught, and they are challenged by people that are scared of ignorance or are scared of feeling lower beside an intelligence person. But all those kids can be free to be explored and understand deeper, because they brought the memory from other sides. So thank you for freeing everyone to be fearless of dying alone, and spend their lives in casting mode, trying to sell someone to not die alone. But now it's exciting. It's like, hey, when is going to happen? I'm ready for it. Let's travel through the pine cone.
Well,
Please keep sharing for me to understand water deeper, and everyone to understand how to, by increasing life force and detoxifying your waters within and structuring the water you consume and purifying the water around, and not consuming putrefaction, neither fermentation, neither nothing that is toxifying or acidifying. And we can have an amazing experience as walking crystals we avatars are. So thank you.
well, let's do a little more on the science there, using the metaphor.
Please, can I ask you for something like we have a bunch of young people wanting really to understand how reality works, because there's a tiny few of examples of coherence out there as adults for the kids. So let's try to use like kid language for the kids that might hear you and get excited with water and fractality.
Well, that's good, and you're right to talk about bliss as the doorway in to not just successful death, but that immortality. And what the bliss is, as you say, is no resistance to compression. So when you say being fearless, what you actually mean is the absence of electrical resistance to compression. Now, the physics, and again the electrical engineering of this, but it may be a 14-year-old kid's language. If you visualize that caduceus, that is the harmonic cascade, of course, of the atom of hydrogen. That's what I newly proved with my new equation for the hydrogen radii. But if you extend that harmonic equation, the exact powers of golden ratio to Planck, you get the brainwave sequence, alpha, beta, in golden ratio that makes bliss. And also the same way to teach kids to see without their eyes. And during that bliss process, you can measure that the DNA braiding process, remember hydrogen and water is at the center of every rung, so that slinky suddenly braids the braid of the braid within the braid, thread, string, rope, fat rope, which is exactly how DNA does embeddability, literally perfect nesting. And so the short summary of the physics is the broader the spectra, which means the greater the number of harmonics in that cascade that are present at once, the more conscious, the more negentropy. So yes, hydrogen conscious, but if you braid the hydrogen into the perfect vortex, for example, Victor Schauberger's water vortex with a little bit of rock powder, make it piezo, started to implode, spontaneously got colder, and made power from gravity. Well, if you extend that principle, you get what happens in DNA during bliss, and you get what happens during death, which is you get a bigger black hole, more broad spectral implosion. In medicine, this is called the definition of immune health. The definition of immune health for doctors is called harmonic inclusiveness in heart rate variability, which is literally fractality. So the more harmonics that are in your heart at once, the more you have an immune system. It's very simple, which is literally having compassion for everyone. The more people you invite in your heart, and which is called get fractal or get dead. The healthy heart is a fractal heart. So, and you can measure those heart harmonics causing your DNA to braid implode during love and bliss. So all that's happening during all those processes is the implosion that started with perfect fractal hydrogen embeds, nested in a bigger spiral and a bigger rose and bigger embedding, and a longer wave embeds in a shorter wave. And that, as that process continues, you get more and more negentropy and literally more mindfulness. That's how you. So you're right. If you structure water that way, and you structure your DNA that way, and you structure your heart that way, another example of this is, if you want to get immortal, go make a magnetic map of your bed, and then your house, and then your town, and then your city. And the day when all of those magnetic maps look like a rose, and literally the magnetic map of Prague originally is literally a rose, the more you're on the track toward the immortality that Ava's talking about. And literally, I personally had the experience of increased lucid dreaming in Prague with that fractal rose-like magnetic map. So you arrange everything to the geometry of implosion. Now, electrically, what that means is that your house needs to be built of material that can accept that charge distribution, which in science is called high dielectric constant. In practice, it just means your house needs to be made of biologic material, wood and stone and natural fabric, so that capacitance can breathe and your aura can grow. Whereas if your house is made of steel and aluminum and dead air and electrosmog, your aura is trapped and the children lose their souls. So don't send them to a steel school, etc., which is biologic architecture.
Thank you so much, Dan. So what about this? What about if we erase other constructs? What about if life itself is eternal and sometimes chooses to remember and sometimes doesn't? What about if life itself already knows that everything is water having fun with electricity and magnet
and charge.
Yeah, with charge, with life force, just having fun and having different expressions of life force.
That's right.
And life knows all this, but then life decides to forget everything and to recover consciousness fragmented in an illusion that you have to remember that you are not your memory, but you can take it on and on in eternity, because life is always happening. So life is eternity itself. And if life is eternity and we are a drop of eternity, we are eternity. And with what would you understand that we have that charge within our water, and within and outside is exactly the same, that means that we can explore that we can't die because we never started. We never started because when did you start it? You started in the sperm of your father, in the ovule of the mother, choosing which sperm is properly the one. When did you start? In your grandfather? So if you never start, you can't finish, because life is never finished. So it's about, I'm doing my best to erase all the fear that is putting people in uncomfortable situations just in case they're gonna die. Why to make a miserable life if we can understand how life never starts and never finishes, and we can explore how water creates any possibility. So we can start exploring maybe how we travel through thinking and through the motion that travels through those patterns, how our belief system programs the morphic fields that creates the impact of wavelengths in the particles of water that crystallize all around, I guess. So please let me know how we can support humans to keep that state of bliss that will allow water structure to be completely imploded and completely a pineapple.
Yes.
Let us know how to maintain the state of bliss. So
it's
everyone in the house can learn and keep that.
As Korotkov measured, you go to a place where the air is literally electrically fractal, where harmonic conclusiveness is sacred, and now we know what that is. That's where Kozyrev could set up a Kozyrev mirror and achieve telepathy. It's a place of efficient compression, those longitudinal fractal nodes we talked about, the definition of sacred space. So where compression is perfected for waves, what has been called sacred space, which starts with the fractal geometry of hydrogen, but continues when hydrogen is braided in vortex and then braided in DNA imploding, called bliss, you get this pathway to compression. And ancestral memory, the collective unconscious, the communion of saints, what you're calling getting eternal, is a distribution of waves that are at high pressure, and they're distributed with great discipline. So to get in and out of ancestral memory requires that great discipline, as any Aboriginal shaman could have told you. Psychologically, what that means is that, as you said, to get fearless, what it means is that you need to recognize that the waves in water and DNA have, for 1 billion years, been gathering a library of survival information. And you can only have a library card to that hologram if you engage in that discipline, which psychologically is the coherence we call pure intention. But in physics, it's a longitudinal wave array at high pressure. And to get in and get out of there, like the black hole of perfect death or bliss, which is the same. Or another example is when Daniel Brinkley wrote 2 or 3 books on becoming superconductive at near-death experience because of being hit by lightning, or Tesla's transformative experience from surviving lightning. Lightning, just like Kundalini, is that high-pressure communication system. So to reach in and out of there, you need that stillness, which feels like lightning. whether you call it kundalini or bliss or a lightning strike or death, it's the same very high pressure that when you feel that wave inside you come to pressure, which you do if you drink really good water regularly and eat really good food, you feel that availability of that charged still point inside you where it connects to a high pressure, literally a high voltage grid. It's like the transformers in your neighborhood. You know, your local power comes in at 110 or 220 volts, but the only way to get power to go long distances, you know, thousands of volts, high pressure. Well, that high pressure array, the communion of saints, the collective unconscious, it's like the Ananda Marga people telling you, you need to continuously love the divine intelligence. And then you get a communications radio with it. So that, the fact that you're continuously in love with the divine, which is the psychological language, is the physics of your relationship to that high pressure array, which has, quote, in mind, the survival path out of every situation, which is literally the pure principle. So every time you had some trauma in your life, if you distill that trauma to the memory of pure principle and the memory of what was learned that serves everyone, suddenly you're talking to that collective high pressure radio and you have that embeddability.
Thank you so much, Dan. So what about if we don't have to become eternal, because we are always eternal, because time doesn't exist, it's just an illusion of not identifying how the gears of thinking works. So life is happening all the time, so eternity is life. And if life is manifested through water, water is the source. So if you get in love with life, people will tell you, how I'm going to get in love with my life if I have this and that and I miss this and I because I think the entire day I want this to happen and then I will be happy and I miss this imprint of pleasure of my life, so I have to be whatever. And so all this lack of understanding of how the gears of thinking works and how we are completely conditioned with things that doesn't exist, and we don't understand how really truly life exists, because people like you, I don't know why you are not all over the place, opening schools all over the world and exploring how to become a Mowgli or a Jedi better with physics.
Well,
so what about if water, aeronautics, okay? There's a drop of water in the floor and it becomes hexagonal when life force of the sun hits and increase life force. You call it in a beautiful name, I can't remember again, sorry. So the life force, if the water is like this, the particle life force increases, and that makes other, by fractal attraction, other particles in the dodecahedron structure go and pressure, and that is a cloud.
That's
good. The same water.
Yes, but
that cloud increases life force, and then become a lightning. What you said, a lightning will be the death of the cloud, and the cloud becomes another expression of water again and again and again. And if we're immersed in it, is a way of understanding how, by keeping bliss and maintaining what you call pure intention, is basically no intention. There is not an idea between present reality and yourself, because you are immersed in it without thinking of filtering concepts with fragments, so you can be in love with reality happening, and that state of bliss will enable you to live free of fear of any shift, because you are ready to change the avatar to another implosive expression of reality. And understanding aeronautics is much easier to understand that the spirit, water, consciousness, and life are the same thing.
But
altogether.
Eva, your enthusiasm is perfect, and your psychological metaphors are perfect, and you're pointing to how you get immortal, being that distribution. But if you wanted to have that conversation with the scientist, which is who I am, actually, we would start with understanding time a little more accurately, actually. For example, when you said that time does not exist, that's actually wrong. But what is correct is that time is simply rotation. So Einstein didn't understand this very well, but in fact, you rotate that wave of compressible charge in the superfluid of the universe, and that rotation causes inertia, which is named mass, and that rotation has a period, which is named time. So to say that time doesn't exist is actually wrong. But what does exist is the pure principle of pattern spin density. So, for example, when you accelerate, time speeds up because spin rate speeds up. That's called translational vorticity of charge. That's actually the real relativity. The time-space doesn't bend. No, the only thing that moved was spin rate increase due to acceleration, named time. So, but what you were right about was the fact that when that distribution is perfect, that the actual only thing that achieved perfect distribution was pure principle. So when you embed in the pure principle of symmetry, implosive pine cones, roses, whatever you call it, pentagonal dodecafractals, that pure principle does exist everywhere at once, because that wavelength that goes out from interlongitudinal does travel faster than light. Actually, golden ratio times the speed of light. Raymond Chow's famous measurements of how you get faster than light were all between 1.5 and 1.7 times c, the speed of light, because golden ratio times the speed of light is the primary velocity faster than light, proving our phase conjugate fractal cause of gravity, and how you embed in the perfect distribution that you like, called getting eternal. So the point is that if you identified with pure principle, identify, then you can be part of that perfect distribution. And then, instead of saying time doesn't exist, what you could say is you can't become perfectly distributed, actually. Which means, for example, if there's a strong emotion, 100 years down the road, it emits a waveform which does propagate faster than light, and therefore, quote unquote, travels in time. But actually, physics first measured time reversal when lasers phase conjugate, two lasers with a pine cone thing, and you have time reversal and negentropy. That's the first time physics measured it. But what they named time reversal was actually negentropy, that they say it increased order. So you can time reverse rusted steel to be unrusted, but you cannot do the reverse, because you cannot time reverse toward disorder. Very important principle, because that tells you that actually what you're calling time reversal is actually negentropy and increased order. So this distribution of spin pattern density is what you call identify with the pure principle in every situation. You will be perfectly distributed as a wave, and then you'll get immortal. It's a more, not only is it a more accurate way that rather than saying time doesn't exist, but it actually allows you to understand exactly what time is, which is simply the spin rate of charge, which when it's fractal is immortal, just as you're saying.
Thank you so much for clarifying and optimizing my understandings, because I want to share visuals as the deepest truth I can. So I will explain, I will explain time as a block of infinity possibilities made combining. Because at the end, we see like you are an electrical engineer, so that's why your connection is. I have to say that if someone is seeing a screen different, is because Dan is not only an electrical engineer, he's hyper-perceptive, so he has special care with electromagnetic smoke, electromagnetic fields, and EMF in the house, so that's why maybe you see him like cutting the image or whatsoever, but because he's taking care of himself maybe better than many of us because of the electrosmoke. Anyhow, what about if wholeness that contains everything has already all the combinations of wavelengths, that if you cut the wavelengths spirit, or however you want to call it, you cut it like this, you see that it's a fractal. All those fractals are already there. How to